This video covers some essential strategies that can help you maximize your score on the GMAT exam. The first thing we're going to talk about is time management. In the maths and verbal sections of the exam, your biggest enemy is time. With an average of less than 2 minutes per question, you'll need to work very quickly. You'll also need to allocate your time as effectively as possible. One thing that's clear when the statistics from past GMAT exams are analysed is that spending more time on a question usually doesn't help a candidate to answer it correctly. In fact, more often than not, when a candidate spends a lot of time on a question, he or she gets it wrong. This means it's extremely important to work out quickly whether or not you'll be able to answer a question. The first 30 seconds are vital. If, within that time, you can't clearly work out how to tackle the question, take a guess and move on. Far better to spend that time answering another question than to waste it on a question that you'll probably get wrong anyway. It's also very important that you leave no question unanswered. This is because the penalty for unanswered questions is more severe than the penalty for incorrect answers. If you're reaching the end of a section and you can see that you won't be able to finish it, the best strategy is to quickly make guesses for all of the remaining questions. The next thing we're going to talk about is the computer adaptive testing system. This system is used in both the maths and verbal sections of the exam. The CAT system works like this. It begins by asking a question of average difficulty. If you get the question correct, the computer adjusts your score upwards and selects a more difficult question to ask you next. If you get the question wrong, the computer adjusts your score downwards and selects an easier question to ask you next. The aim is to reach a kind of equilibrium where you alternate correct and incorrect answers. It's this equilibrium that corresponds to your final score, not the percentage of correct and incorrect answers that you get. Importantly, this means that earlier questions are worth more than later questions. To see why, let's look at how a candidate's score changes as he or she answers a series of questions. The computer begins by asking a question of average difficulty, which corresponds to a score of 500. The candidate's score will rise to 580 if he or she gets that question correct, and it will fall to 420 if he or she gets that question wrong. Let's say the candidate gets the question correct, so that his or her score rises to 580. For the next question, the candidate's score will rise to 640 for a correct answer, or it will fall to 520 for an incorrect answer. Let's assume that he or she answers the question correctly. For the last question, the candidate's score will rise to 680, or it will fall to 600. Again, let's assume that he or she answers the question correctly. Note that at the first stage, the candidate's score adjusted by 80 points. At the second stage, it adjusted by 60 points. And at the third stage, it adjusted by 40 points. The earlier the question, the more it contributes to the candidate's score. This is very important for determining how best to allocate time on the GMAT exam. We're going to discuss that next. The math section of the exam includes 37 questions to be answered in 75 minutes. That's an average of just over 2 minutes per question. However, since earlier questions are worth more than later questions, it makes sense to allocate your time accordingly. This is what we recommend. For questions 1 to 10, allocate 30 minutes, giving you 3 minutes per question. For questions 11 to 25, allocate another 30 minutes, giving you 2 minutes per question. And for questions 26 to 37, allocate 15 minutes, giving you 1 minute and 15 seconds per question. For questions 26 to 37, you'll need to work very quickly. That's okay, because these questions are worth less than the earlier questions on which you'll be spending more time. However, this is why it's very important that you don't waste time on any questions that you can't answer. It's also why it's important to be disciplined in keeping to these time allocations. The verbal section of the exam includes 41 questions to be answered in 75 minutes. That's an average of just under 2 minutes per question. This is how we recommend you allocate your time. For questions 1 to 12, allocate 30 minutes, giving you 2 minutes and 30 seconds per question. For questions 13 to 30, allocate another 30 minutes, giving you 1 minute and 40 seconds per question. And for questions 31 to 41, allocate 15 minutes, giving you 1 minute and 22 seconds per question. Again, you'll need to work very quickly on the last 10 questions, so it's important that you keep to these allocations. That's all we've got time for in this video. As always, thanks for watching.